Thank you so much, Satulu. And I will now present my screen. Um, Hi everyone. My name is Tejas Chopra, and today I'll be talking about how you would upskill for a multi-cloud world. I am very proud to be a part of the GSDC this year, and I hope that through this session I'll be able to communicate some of my learnings of how we were designing software for multi-cloud at different organizations, and then I can put that in front of you as consumers, as people that work in different organizations and enterprises. This is the agenda for the talk today. I'll go over a brief introduction about myself. We'll go over some of the basics of cloud storage in terms of costs and footprint. We'll learn about cloud storage primitives, and then we will get into how you would design technologies such as compression, deduplication, and encryption for the cloud, how the future of cloud looks like, and finally, some learnings and takeaways. I'll focus this session mostly on the storage aspect of multi-cloud environments. The brief introduction about myself: I'm a senior software engineer at Netflix. I work on the data storage platform group at Netflix, and I am working on creating assets for different Netflix studios and streaming platforms. Along with that, I'm also an international keynote speaker. I talk on cloud computing, distributed systems, and blockchain. Prior to Netflix, I was a senior software engineer at Box, where again, I was designing software for millions of customers and petabytes of data. And then I worked at companies such as Datrium, Samsung, Tensilica, and Apple. So the reason that I bring up the past is because at Netflix, for example, we use Amazon AWS as the cloud. At Box, we used GCP, which is Google as the cloud provider. So designing software that could work on Amazon, Google, and different cloud providers requires you to provide abstractions. And that is what I'll delve into today. So you may wonder as to what's the big deal with cloud these days? Why do organizations move to cloud? And there are several reasons that organizations pick cloud. Firstly, cloud provides ease of manageability. As an organization, you want to focus on your business problems. You do not want to focus on building infrastructure to solve the business problems. So that job can be done by someone who is best at doing that, which is the cloud providers. Cloud also provides scalability. So as your requests scale, as you get more requests coming into your services, cloud will naturally scale elastically, and you do not have to spend a lot of money upfront. You will just pay as you go in cloud model. But along with all these benefits, there are also some side effects to cloud. There are many companies that have come up these days that are around cloud cost modeling. And this is because the costs associated with the cloud are often confusing. A very simple example is when you upload a file to cloud. So you may think that you're paying for the storage on cloud, but actually you're paying the cost to upload the file, that is to make the request of upload. You're paying the cost to store the data on the file, and even more so, you're paying the cost to egress or read the file back from cloud. So you can imagine if a given file is stored in cloud and if the file is read many times, you pay the egress cost each time. Now imagine a company such as Box, which has hundreds of petabytes of data, or Netflix that has exabytes of data. The cost of just reading the data out of the cloud can actually exceed billions of dollars over a period of 5 years. And so if you see the diagram here, it shows that there's a regular cloud bill, but there are several techniques of optimizations that organizations use to reduce the cloud bill. Firstly, there's right sizing, which means choosing the right instance type for the appropriate cloud use case. I'm extremely sorry. I have a 10-month-old baby with me, so please bear the noise. The second is reserved instances. So you can actually reserve instances in advance on cloud and you will end up paying less. And the third one, which we'll cover in this session, is storage. Designing systems around cloud storage can actually save you millions of dollars if done in the right way. Several on-premise systems use techniques such as deduplication, compression, and encryption to reduce the file footprint. And we will see if we can leverage these techniques for cloud storage as well. So when you try to think about a multi-cloud system, how would you go about building it? The first step is understanding the different APIs that are exposed by different cloud providers. For example, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft all have different APIs. And you will have different caveats in these different APIs. Um, Amazon supports streaming of data to cloud. It also supports checksums. So checksums are when you want to upload a file to cloud, you can actually provide a checksum of the file while doing the upload, and that the storage provider will validate when the file has landed on cloud. The second is availability and durability guarantees. So availability implies the amount of uptime of your service on cloud. So for example, 3 nines of availability implies that your service will be down for 8 hours in a year. And 4 nines of availability implies that it will be down for a few minutes. Durability is when you store the data, if that data is going to be present eventually on cloud, which means that you're not losing data. And many cloud providers tout 11 nines of durability. So understanding these different availability and durability guarantees of different tiers in cloud is very important. And when you are designing systems that store data on cloud, you will eventually end up paying a lot of money. So many cloud providers will want you to design cloud storage using tiers, hot data, cold data, and archival policies. Now, what this means is that when, for example, a great example is Netflix. When Netflix movies are created, they are active for the first month, but eventually over a period of time, you want those movies, not many people are watching those movies. So you want to move them to colder tiers of data simply because they are less expensive than the hot tiers. And so when you move to the colder tiers of data, you need to be mindful of the availability guarantees. Um, a very great example of this is when at Box, I started using S3's, like S3 has automatic movement of data from different tiers. It calls it intelligent tiering. Now, intelligent tiering will move your data intelligently from your hot tier to the cold tier. But the problem is that the availability goes from 99.99 to 99.9 only. Now, you may think that it has just moved one by 0.09, but it actually has implications because now my service will not be available for 8 hours in a year versus 52 minutes in a year. So that means an increase of 7 hours of downtime for my service. So that's why it's very important when you're building a multi-cloud system to be aware of the different tiers of cloud storage and how they are availability and durability guarantees are. The third point I would like to say and stress a bit more is typically organizations, when they build for cloud, will always have some form of on-premise system. And this is done to reduce the cloud cost and to improve latencies. So when you have an on-premise system, your read request can be served from the on-premise system because you will cache the hot data on-premise. And that will also mean that you will have lesser latencies because the on-premise system is generally closer to your application. And cloud also enables enterprises to build security primitives. And at companies such as Box, which are dealing with healthcare data, finance data, it is very important that the fault domain of an enterprise be fault domain on cloud storage be an enterprise. So those are some of the caveats and ideas around building a multi-cloud system. So when you think about upskilling, upskilling implies what do you need to build systems for multi-cloud? You have to explore different cloud APIs and alternatives, and there are tons of options. If you just go to Amazon's page, you will see like hundreds of services available today. So you do not need to understand all of the services. You need to just understand some basic services for storage, for databases, for continuous integration, continuous deployment, Lambdas, and for different networking primitives that Amazon has, and then build your solution around that. And the way to upskill yourself is to start with a simple free machine on the cloud, and you get that on all the cloud providers, and just start writing code. Use serverless, use API gateways, write microservices with observability, metrics, and testing in place. That is a great way for you to get started on your journey to cloud. And it always helps when you are reading these API manuals, because eventually when you are working, you will have exposure to only these, and so it will really help you if you get the muscle memory built over a period of time. And like I said, explore the different options. For example, if your service needs SQL database or a NoSQL database versus a graph database, all of those are actually what you will be using eventually in organizations, and this will be the best way to get to that level. Let me now start by introducing how you would build storage for cloud, for any cloud, right? We will use techniques such as compression, encryption, and deduplication. So just to recap, compression is the ability to reduce the size of the stored object when you compress the object during the writes and read back the object and decompress it during the reads. There are several compression techniques such as gzip, lzip, lz4. Some of them are lossy techniques, some of them are lossless techniques. One thing to note is that not all data is compressible. Media files are not compressible. Images are not compressible. Text files give great compression results. Overhead, there is an overhead when you are compressing data, but it is generally less than 2%. And the overhead is in terms of both memory and latency, because when you are compressing data, you need to first accumulate enough data in memory, compress it, and then store it. So you will have some memory footprint when you're accumulating data, and also you'll have some latency because you're waiting to collect data and then compress it. This is very acceptable for file storage. So for example, at Box, which was just used to upload files and folders, this was very used very heavily and appropriate. But when you think about Netflix, where we are streaming the videos to cloud and videos are not compressible, it doesn't make sense to run compression algorithms on that streaming video. I have seen compression ratios more than 5x on Box. Deduplication is the ability to store one copy of data and hand out references to users and apps. So when you have duplicate data, you, instead of storing multiple copies of that duplicate data, you will just store one copy. And so if you have just one copy, you may wonder how would different operations work, especially delete. So when a delete request comes in, you do not delete the file from the backend unless all the users and applications have deleted the file. How do you check for duplicates before storing the file? So there are two techniques of doing that. One is online deduplication, which means before the file is stored on cloud, you actually know that there is a duplicate on cloud. And the other one is offline deduplication, which is you store the file on cloud and then later you recognize that, oh, there's a duplicate on cloud. So you delete the duplicate files. Online deduplication is a bit trickier compared to offline deduplication, because to know that a file exists on cloud, you need to know all the files that exist on cloud. And then you can typically solve this problem using fingerprints of these files. So you will create a hash of the file, which is a unique signature for every file, and store these hashes in a global table, global database, if you may. Whenever a file is being streamed to cloud, you will actually compute the hash of the streaming process of the file while it is being streamed. And then if that hash matches any hash on the cloud, you know that there's a copy on the cloud for this file. So you do not need to upload the file to cloud. In the offline deduplication case, you will upload the file to cloud, but you will have daemons and processes that run on cloud that periodically compute these hashes and compare different files. And if they match, they will delete one of the copies and update the reference counts of the other copy. So far, I've been talking about deduplication at the file granularity, but deduplication can be done at finer granularities as well. At Netflix, the file size is generally hundreds of megabytes or gigabytes. So even if one pixel changes, your entire file will change. So instead of deduplicating at the file granularity, at Netflix, we split a file into multiple chunks and we deduplicate at the chunk granularity, which means that if one pixel has changed, 90% of the chunks will remain the same. Only the chunk that has that pixel will have a duplicate or a new copy. Deduplication boundaries are also often dictated by security. For example, at Box, we could only deduplicate data within an enterprise or an organization that was uploading files. We couldn't do that across organizations. So this shows how deduplication works. You have data that is sitting in a data store. You will generate hash values from each piece of data. They are compared to identify the duplicates, and finally, they are replaced with pointers to save storage space. Now, encryption is another great technique that has been exposed by cloud providers. One of the problems that enterprises have with cloud is that it is not very secure. But by providing encryption techniques, cloud providers have now come on par with on-premise systems. When you encrypt data, you're actually obfuscating the data to avoid any unauthorized access on the wire or at rest. Encryption of the wire is solved by using TLS. And when you want to encrypt the data, there are two strategies that are employed. One is client-side encryption and the other is server-side encryption. In client-side encryption, the client, which is the machine that is doing the upload to cloud, will encrypt the data before it sends it over the network to the cloud provider. And on the server-side encryption, the client will send plain text bytes, but they will send it to an SSL endpoint of the cloud provider. That means that the data will be encrypted over the wire using TLS. And then once the data lands on the server side, the server, which is the cloud provider, will encrypt the data and store it locally. So that means encryption is done on the server side in that case. I have seen that at most organizations, both Netflix and Box included, clients prefer encrypting the data. And at Netflix, because the file sizes are often greater than the max cloud storage size, we use chunking, which I explained in the deduplication part as well. So each chunk is separately encrypted using a separate encryption key. One thing to note is that encrypted data is not compressible and not dedupable, which means that once you encrypt your data, you cannot get the benefits of compression or deduplication from it. So when we think about how we want to order all encryption, compression, and deduplication, the rule is encrypt last. Because once the data is encrypted, you cannot compress or deduplicate. And so you would want to push out encryption to the end. Now, if you have client-side encryption, which is used at all organizations, it means that you are forced to employ online deduplication, which means deduplicating before you send the data over the network to cloud. And you will also employ compression on the client side. The design can really get complicated if you have to design such systems. One other idea that we explored was instead of having per object encryption, or in case of Netflix, per chunk encryption key, we maintain a single encryption key per pool of objects. So this implies that we will then have better deduplication even after encryption, because if you are encrypting two files with the same encryption key, and if the files are similar, then they will actually deduplicate later. So even after encryption. But this has also implications on security, because now you're using one encryption key for multiple objects rather than one encryption key per object. The second rule is deduplicate first. You want to employ online deduplication. So like I explained, when the data is streamed, you will maintain a global pool of fingerprints or hashes or signatures of data. You will compare the current object's fingerprint with all the fingerprints in the database. And if the data is present, there is no need to stream the data to cloud. You will just increase the reference count of the fingerprint, and return a reference to stored object on the cloud. The reason you deduplicate first is because compression algorithms can change. And by deduplicating first, you're protecting against any change in the algorithms in the future. So now, if you use these techniques, how would you design uploading a file to cloud for any cloud system? We will use an on-premise system so that we can absorb a lot of the read requests, and in conjunction with the cloud, so that we can employ techniques such as online deduplication and compression before the data is sent to cloud. So when the client uploads a file, you will first compare or create a hash of the file and look up in a global fingerprint table if that hash is present or not. Assuming this is the first time the file is being uploaded, the hash will not be present in the fingerprint table. So you will compress the data and write it locally on your local storage. Writing compressed bits on local storage will take up lesser space and will allow your local storage to be used for more files and objects. Once it is written locally, you will finally have an encryption done again locally on your on-premise system. And finally, you will upload the file to cloud. Note that you have client-side encryption, you have online deduplication, and you have compression all taken care of on the on-premise systems. Finally, when the file is uploaded to cloud, you will actually update your fingerprint table with the updated location of the file in cloud. So this is how an optimum write flow will work. What happens when you have to read a file? So when a read request is issued, you first reach out to your global fingerprint table and check the location of the file. Most of the read requests will be served by your local storage so that you do not pay the egress cost of removing the data from cloud. But let's say this is the first time you're reading the file. In that case, the location information in global fingerprint table will be forwarded to the client and the client will issue a read from cloud. You will download the encrypted and compressed object to your on-premise system, and you will apply these techniques in the reverse order. So you will first decrypt the data and store it in your local storage. These are compressed bits at this point. So you will decompress the data, update the global fingerprint table with the location of the data in your local storage, and then mark the read to be successful. Any subsequent read request for this file will come to the global fingerprint table and find the data in local storage. So it does not have to make the call to cloud. So given that we've designed such systems, what are the takeaways and learnings from designing for multiple clouds? First is that many organizations such as Box first store the data on premise and then upload it to cloud. This saves egress costs. In Netflix, many files are temporary in nature. So you can imagine an artist that works on multiple iterations of an asset. Um, each of these iterations are temporary. Only 1% of it will make it to the eventual movie. So you do not want to pay the cost of storing all of that to cloud. You would rather store them on on-premise systems, delete them, and only store the final copy on cloud, which is done at Netflix. Today, we talk about cloud and all these cloud vendors, which are like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. They are all centralized players. But if you imagine the world that will happen with the blockchain and with different applications built on top of blockchain, cloud will become decentralized, which means that there will not be a central entity controlling cloud. You will have different nodes that are spread across the world, which will store your files and folders. So in some ways, we are going to move away from centralized cloud providers into a more decentralized world. But the principles of using APIs, principles of building on these primitives will stay the same. Andreessen Horowitz recently did a study, and they claimed that there is a cost associated with moving to cloud. Many organizations start off by on-premise systems, then move completely to cloud. And what that means is at some point, they realize that they are paying a lot of money to cloud providers. So they again try to move back to on-premise systems. A healthy strategy is to have multi-cloud and hybrid cloud, which means have a mix of on-premise and cloud. And that is the way forward. So my suggestion and my learning is to not design systems for specific services or specific cloud providers, but keep it generic. If it means having abstraction layers on top and having different implementations being a plug and play model, that is the right and preferred way for designing systems around the cloud. That's my time. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or my email address.